She called me trash at my own son's wedding, then slid a prenup across the table, like I was the help. My name is Jody Morgan. I'm 70 years old, and I live in Spokane, Washington. I worked for nearly 30 years as a city parks administrator before I retired. I still volunteer sometimes, mostly with tree planting and walking trail projects, but these days I spend more time tending my small backyard garden and reading mystery novels on my porch. I've lived in the same house for 40 years. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, full of memories, and for a long time, full of love. I lost my husband, Roy, 11 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. He was here one morning and gone that night. We were married 32 years. I still find myself reaching for his hand in the middle of the night. Our son Michael was just 10 when Roy passed. I raised him by myself after that. It wasn't easy, but we made it through. Michael was a quiet kid, sensitive, thoughtful, always had a book in his hands. He worked hard, never got into trouble. The kind of boy who held the door for strangers and remembered to call me on my birthday. He's 33 now, lives in Seattle, works in environmental law. I don't know much about what that job involves, but he's proud of it. I'm proud of him. He doesn't visit as often as I'd like, but that's life, isn't it? Kids grow up, get busy, build their own lives. When he told me he was getting married, I was happy for him. At least I thought I was. He didn't give many details, just said her name was Tessa and that she worked in urban planning, said they met during a city redevelopment project. I asked if she was kind. He said she was smart. I asked if she made him laugh. He just said, "She's organized, Mom. Driven." That was all. A week later, the wedding invitation came in the mail. Heavy envelope, thicker than any invite I'd ever seen. Gold foil edges, embossed lettering. It looked like something out of a magazine. I opened it slowly, thinking maybe he'd tucked a note inside. He hadn't. The card read, Tessa Langford and Michael Morgan. Request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration, Bainbridge Estate, Bainbridge Island, Washington. It didn't say, together with their families. Just their names. No mention of me, not even on the return address. I sat at the kitchen table holding that envelope for a long time. Something about it didn't feel right. It was elegant, sure, sophisticated, but cold, sterile, like it had been designed by someone with no warmth in them. Michael had always liked simple things. He used to tell me he wanted to get married in the mountains, said he wanted a short ceremony outdoors, something quiet and natural. This wasn't that. This was a production. I flipped the card over. Small writing on the back. Attire. Formal. Transportation. Provided from Seattle Ferry Terminal. RSVP via website only. No children. No +1s unless previously arranged. I felt that little knot form in my stomach. I'd never been to Bainbridge Island, but I'd heard of it. One of those places where houses don't have price tags and people don't mow their own lawns. I could already picture the kind of wedding it would be. Champagne towers, string quartets, the kind of crowd where I'd be lucky if anyone even remembered my name. I looked at the Langford name again. I remembered that name. I'd met Tessa's mother once, about a year ago. Michael invited me to a fundraiser in Seattle, some clean water initiative. He said it would be casual, but I showed up and immediately realized I was out of place. Everyone was dressed like they'd just stepped off the runway. I wore my best sweater and a pair of flats. I thought I looked nice, until I saw the looks. That's where I met her, Bernice Langford. She barely said 2 words to me, just nodded, said, "So you're Michael's mother," like I was a footnote. Then she walked off mid-conversation. No handshake, no small talk. I chalked it up to her being busy, but deep down, I knew She saw me, made a judgment, and dismissed me, like I didn't belong. I didn't bring it up with Michael. I didn't want to be the mom who complains. I figured maybe I was reading too much into things. But now, holding that invitation in my hand, I could feel that same feeling crawling back. That sense of being outside the circle, forgotten, or maybe just not wanted. I took the envelope and walked to the window. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the backyard. My tomatoes were coming in nicely. The wind chimes danced gently. I clutched the invitation against my chest and whispered out loud, "What am I walking into?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew it was something bigger than flowers and dresses, something colder than I was ready for. And I had a feeling I wasn't going to like what I found. I took the early ferry over to Bainbridge Island the day of the rehearsal dinner. The ride was smooth, quiet. I sat by the window with my hands folded in my lap, watching the water. It was cold for May, with a low gray sky and a chill breeze. I clutched my coat tighter, even though I was inside. I'd picked out a navy blue dress. Nothing flashy, just something that fit well and made me feel neat and put together. I wore a small pearl necklace Roy gave me on our 20th anniversary. I figured it was enough. The estate was bigger than I imagined. Gates, long driveway, fountains in front, looked more like a country club than someone's home. When I stepped out of the shuttle, I was greeted by staff, young men in black suits and white gloves. One asked if I was with the Langford party or staff. I told him I was the groom's mother. He blinked twice, then gave a tight smile and led me toward the dining hall. The place looked like it had been set for royalty. Long white tablecloths, candles floating in glass cylinders, a live jazz band playing softly in the corner. Waiters moved through the room holding silver trays with little things I couldn't name, something on a cracker, tiny spoons filled with colorful pastes. Not one plate of mashed potatoes or deviled eggs in sight. There were place cards on the tables. I walked around slowly, trying to find my name. After circling the room twice, I stopped a server and asked if there was a separate list. He glanced at the master seating chart. "Let's see. Morgan, you're at table 11. Over there." Table 11 was in the back corner, near the swinging door to the kitchen. I sat down alone, facing a wall. From my seat, I could see the Langfords front and center at the head table, talking and laughing like a scene from one of those high society shows on TV. Michael was there too, but I hadn't even gotten a hug yet. A waiter offered me a glass of sparkling water with a lemon curl. I accepted it with a quiet thank you and sat up straight, folding my hands in my lap. I kept thinking maybe Michael hadn't realized. Maybe it was just a mistake. I finally caught a glimpse of him when the photographer called for a group shot. He was wearing a gray suit, looked tired but handsome. He spotted me across the room and gave me a small wave. I raised my hand a little. That was it. Then Bernice touched his elbow and turned him back toward the camera. The Langfords looked like they had stepped out of a fashion catalog. Tessa's father wore a cream-colored suit. Her mother, Bernice, had on a dark green dress that looked like it cost more than my car. Her hair was styled to perfection. Her makeup looked like it had been applied by a professional. Not a line on her face. She looked younger than me, though I knew she wasn't. Tessa wore a pale blue cocktail dress. She glanced around the room and made eye contact with me for half a second before looking away. I stayed seated, pretending to sip the water, even though my stomach had tightened into a knot. I didn't want to cause a scene. I told myself I was just here to support Michael. That's what a mother does. You sit through it, smile, keep your dignity. But then I heard it. 2 servers walked past me, carrying trays. One of them leaned in toward the other and said under her breath, "That's the groom's mom?" Doesn't look the part. They kept walking, but their voices stayed in my ears. I felt my face go hot, not just from embarrassment, but from something deeper. Like I didn't belong. Like I'd been put in a place on purpose. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking slightly, so I clasped them tighter in my lap. My wedding ring was still there. I never took it off. Maybe that's what they noticed. Or maybe it was the simple dress, the fact that I wasn't glowing with makeup or dripping in diamonds. After a while, a woman I didn't know came and sat beside me. She said she was Tessa's aunt. She smiled politely, talked about the wine. I nodded where I could, but my mind wasn't in it. I watched as Michael and Tessa moved through the room, greeting guests, posing for pictures. Every time I thought he might come over, someone pulled him in another direction. I waited and waited. Then I stood quietly and slipped out the side door. The air outside was sharp, colder than it had been earlier. The wind came off the water hard and fast, carrying the salty smell of the Puget Sound. I walked a little ways down the path until I found a wooden bench near the cliffside. The waves below hit the rocks with steady rhythm, like breathing. I sat there for a long time, watching the tide roll in and out. My hands were tucked under my coat. I didn't cry. I just sat still, listening. I thought about all the years I packed school lunches, stayed up with fevers, paid bills on a single salary. Thought about the time Michael couldn't afford a college textbook. So I sold some jewelry. Thought about how I never once asked him to repay me, because that's what mothers do. And now I was here, at his wedding, at a table near the kitchen, like I was a guest at someone else's party. I took a deep breath and looked out at the horizon, where the water met the sky in a long, silver line. Something in me shifted that night. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I could feel it, just under the surface, like something that had been quiet for too long was finally waking up. I woke up the next morning with a knot in my back and a heavier one in my chest. The little guest room they'd set me up in was off to the side of the property, in what looked like the old gardener's quarters. It was clean and well kept, but cold. No personal touches. Just a bed, a small lamp, and a folded towel on the chair. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, for a while. I'd hardly spoken to Michael since I arrived. No check-in. No, how was your trip, Mom? Just a wave across a room. The rehearsal was scheduled for late morning. I walked to the main house and kept my coat on until the sun broke through. Everything looked perfect. Flower arches, gold chairs, runners laid across the grass like we were on the cover of a magazine. Inside, the atmosphere was busy but stiff. People moved like they were on a set schedule. No laughter, no relaxed conversation, just planners, photographers, and florists checking their lists. Bernice was in the center of it all, giving instructions with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had a clipboard in her hand, talking fast, telling the staff where to stand and what time certain people were arriving. It felt less like a wedding and more like a fundraiser. Michael showed up 10 minutes later. He looked sharp in a navy suit, but wasn't fully present. He kept glancing at his phone, barely looked around. When someone asked him a question, he gave short answers or nodded without listening. I tried to get his attention just for a moment. You slept all right? I asked when he passed by. He looked up, surprised to see me. Yeah, fine, he said, then turned to check his phone again. Sorry, I just need to answer this. Bernice wants me to look over the guest list. That was it. I stepped back. Let him go. Later, during the ceremony walkthrough, I was told to sit in the second row behind the Langfords. The first row was for immediate family only, the planner said, flipping through her notes. I looked at her, confused. I'm his mother, I said quietly. She paused for half a second, gave me a quick smile, and said, I know. This is just how it was organized. I didn't argue. What was the point? That afternoon, while guests mingled near the cocktail tent, I stepped inside the house to warm up. I found myself in the kitchen, where the staff was prepping hors d'oeuvres. It smelled like butter and herbs, comforting in a way. As I waited for a bit of tea, one of the bridesmaids walked in. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with kind eyes. She recognized me and smiled. "You're Michael's mom, right?" she asked. I nodded. "I just want to say," she lowered her voice, "Michael's a really good guy." We were all surprised when the wedding got moved up so fast. He tried to push it back a few months. But family pressure, you know? I stared at her. He tried to delay it. She nodded. He didn't seem ready. But Tessa's mom, she runs things. The girl glanced over her shoulder. "Anyway, I shouldn't say too much." She gave me a quick smile and walked out. I stood there holding a warm teacup that suddenly felt too heavy. That night, back in the guest room, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with the covers pulled up to my chin, listening to the wind hit the trees outside. I kept thinking back to when Michael broke his arm in high school. He'd fallen during gym. I left work early, drove straight to the ER. The nurse told me they'd sedated him before setting the bone. He came to slowly, groggy, asking for me. I sat at his bedside the entire night, fed him iced chips, held his hand. He was always gentle when he was hurting. He'd try to hide it, but I could tell. His eyes would go quiet. His shoulders would sag just enough. That same look was on his face today. But now I didn't know how to reach him. He was surrounded by people, but I had never felt farther from him. Like I was watching him from behind glass. I started to wonder what had changed. I'd raised him to be thoughtful, to speak up, to choose people who respected him. But here he was marrying into a family where he looked like a background character in his own life, where decisions were made around him, not with him. I rolled over and stared at the ceiling, the room silent except for the creak of the old walls. I thought about asking him straight out the next morning, maybe pulling him aside, but something in my gut said I wouldn't get a full answer. Not with Bernice hovering. I realized I wasn't just worried. I was scared. Scared I was losing my son. Not to love, but to something else entirely. And the worst part, I didn't know to who. The morning of the wedding started early. I was up before the sun. The guest house where they put me didn't have a clock radio, so I used my phone to check the time. It was 5:42 a.m. I hadn't slept much. Outside my window, I could already hear movement, delivery trucks, someone setting up tents, a woman's voice giving instructions. The estate had turned into a full production site. I made myself a cup of weak coffee using the little pod machine in the corner. The creamers were those shelf-stable kinds. No milk, no sugar. Still, I sipped it quietly and looked out the window. The air was gray and heavy. It looked like rain, but no one mentioned that in the forecast. When I walked over to the main house, the front lawn was already buzzing. Men in tuxedos unloaded boxes, florists hauled in huge arrangements, and photographers clicked away, snapping shots of champagne flutes being polished. Everyone moved with purpose, like it was all part of a stage show. I asked one of the coordinators about my corsage. She blinked at me and said, "Corsage? Let me check with Bernice's assistant." She never came back. I walked to the prep area, where some of the women were getting their hair and makeup done. I didn't expect to be pampered, but I figured I could sit and get a little help with my hair. A stylist gave me a quick glance. "Are you with catering?" I blinked. "No, I'm Michael's mother." Her eyes widened. "Oh, sorry. No one said anything." She looked away. I sat down in a corner chair and tried to smooth my hair with the small brush I had in my purse. That's when Bernice came in. She walked in like she owned the air around her. Her dress was cream-colored with silver detail at the sleeves, perfectly pressed. Her shoes didn't make a sound. She saw me right away. "Oh," she said, tilting her head slightly. "There you are." I stood. "Good morning." She didn't reply right away. She looked me up and down, her lips barely curled into what might have passed for a smile. "I wanted to check in," she said calmly. "Tessa has a lot on her mind today, and I'm doing what I can to manage things. This wedding, as you can probably tell, is very curated. A specific feel, a specific tone. We want everything to look aligned in photos. So I hope you'll be mindful." I didn't know what to say, so I nodded. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice. "I told Tessa months ago, marrying into folks like you, it's a risk, but love makes us blind, doesn't it?" She handed me a thick white envelope. "This is the prenuptial agreement. I assumed you'd want to see it. Since your son didn't come from much, I'm sure you understand the need to protect assets." I didn't take it. Not right away. I stared at it in her hand. She added, "Don't worry, it's standard. If the marriage fails, and I hope it doesn't, Michael won't be entitled to anything. No claims on the Langford estate. No shared holdings. No real property. It's clean. Clean is important, Jody." She said my name like it tasted bad. I took the envelope from her hand slowly. My fingers were trembling. I didn't open it right there. I just held it. Bernice gave a small nod, like she'd just handed off a dinner menu. "I'm sure you'll agree it's best this way. We wouldn't want your son dragging your circumstances into things." Then she turned and walked out of the room. I stayed where I was, frozen. A young woman across the room, maybe another bridesmaid, gave me a sympathetic look. I think she heard part of what was said, but she didn't say anything. No one did. I stepped out and walked slowly down the hallway. My heels clicked against the marble floor. I passed the photographers setting up lighting, people adjusting ribbons, someone vacuuming the grand staircase. No one looked at me. I found a quiet room near the back, maybe a library or an office. The door was half open. I stepped inside, sat on the small couch, and stared at the envelope in my hands. It had my son's name on it. I opened it carefully. The pages were thick, the font small. I didn't understand most of the legal wording, but the message was clear. If Michael and Tessa ever separated, he would walk away with nothing. No financial support, no share in her family business, no claim to any home or account. It was ironclad. There was a signature line at the bottom. Michael hadn't signed yet. I stared at the page for a long time. I raised him to believe in love, not money, to be fair, to speak up when something felt wrong. But he was surrounded now by people who talked in contracts and branding, people who placed value on image, not family. And somehow I'd been reduced to a formality. No corsage, no photo, no seat up front, no voice in the room. I sat alone in that beautiful, silent room, holding a document that spelled out, in plain terms, just how small they thought I was. And the worst part, my son had let them. I found Michael near the back terrace about an hour before the ceremony. He was standing alone, looking out over the garden, holding a glass of water. His tie was slightly crooked. He didn't notice me at first. When I stepped closer, he turned, startled. "Hey, Mom," he said quickly, adjusting his tie. "Everything okay?" I held up the envelope. "Bernice gave this to me this morning." He looked at it and let out a short sigh. "It's just a formality." "Is it?" I asked, because it doesn't read like one. He didn't answer. I walked closer. "Michael, do you even want this wedding?" His eyes dropped. "It's complicated." "No," I said softly. "It's not. Either you do or you don't." He ran his hand through his hair. "Tessa wants this. Her family, they want things done a certain way. It's all about appearances with them. And what about you? I asked, what do you want? He looked at me, but said nothing, just stared like he was somewhere else. I'm your mother, I said. I don't care about the flowers or the food or what kind of forks are on the tables. I care about you, and I don't recognize the man I'm looking at. Still nothing. I let out a quiet breath and handed the envelope back to him. Just don't sign anything you'll regret. That's all I'll say. I walked away before he could answer. The ceremony started late. The sky had cleared, and the staff dried the chairs with white towels. Everything was set perfectly. I was seated in the third row, off to the side. Direct sunlight hit the back of my neck. I could barely see the altar between two tall flower arrangements. The front row was filled with Langfords and people I didn't know. Michael walked out first with the officiant. He smiled at the crowd, but it was thin and shaky. Then came Tessa. Her dress was stunning, sleek, simple, with a long train. People gasped when she appeared. The cameras clicked nonstop. They said their vows, exchanged rings, kissed. Everyone clapped. I clapped too, slowly, but inside I was frozen. At the reception, the ballroom was lit like something out of a wedding catalog. Chandeliers, soft music, gold-trimmed menus. I was seated with a few people I hadn't met before, some business partners of the Langfords, and one of Tessa's high school teachers. The Langford side took up the center tables. My table was near the exit, next to the server's door. Dinner was served. I picked at the roasted chicken and tried to make small talk. No one asked me anything about Michael. Then the DJ announced that Bernice would give a toast. She walked up to the mic, glass in hand. "Good evening, everyone," she said. "I want to thank you all for joining us to celebrate this beautiful day." People clapped. She smiled. "Tessa has always had high standards," she continued, pausing for laughter. "So when she brought Michael around, I had questions. I'll admit it. Our families come from very different places." She looked around the room, slowly. "But love builds bridges," she said, "even if the other side of the family lacks polish." Have you ever sat through something so insulting just to keep the peace? If that moment hit you in the chest like it hit me, please like this video. Someone needs to see they're not alone. There were laughs, real, sharp ones, not polite. I felt every eye in the room shift toward me, just for a moment. My chest burned. My hands were shaking. I stood up quietly, left my napkin on the table, and walked out the side door. Outside, the air was crisp. The garden lights had turned on, casting a soft glow on the hedges. I walked past them, heading toward the back patio, hoping to get away from the noise. I found a bench and sat down hard. I didn't cry at first. I just sat still. Then the tears came all at once. Not loud, just steady. I wasn't crying because of the toast. Not really. It was everything. The way I'd been treated, the silence from Michael, the fact that I felt like a stranger at my own son's wedding. I wiped my face with the back of my hand when I heard footsteps. A soft voice said, "Aunt Jody?" It was my niece, Lainey. She was in college, just 21, dressed in a simple navy dress. She sat beside me gently. "I saw what happened," she said. "That was wrong." I nodded. "It's not my place." "Yes, it is," she said quietly. "You're his mother. You should say something. For yourself." I looked at her. Her eyes were steady. I didn't answer, but I stood up, walked back inside. The ballroom was in the middle of dessert. Plates clinked, conversations buzzed. I walked up to the DJ and asked for the microphone. He looked confused, but handed it to me. I stepped to the center of the room. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking a little. I know this isn't planned, but I just need a moment. The room quieted. People turned their chairs. I looked at Michael first, then Bernice, then around the room. My name is Jody Morgan. I'm Michael's mother. A few people nodded politely. Some people may think love is about money, I said, but I raised a man who knows better. Or so I thought. The room was still. I've spent the past 2 days being treated like an afterthought, like I didn't belong here. And maybe to some of you, I don't. But I raised Michael with everything I had. I didn't give him wealth. I gave him values, respect, empathy, integrity. I paused. I hope he remembers that. Because if he doesn't, all this, I gestured to the room, means nothing. If you've ever wanted to say what no one else had the courage to, share this video. Someone in your life may need to hear it today. I handed the microphone back. Silence. Not a sound. I didn't wait to see their faces. I turned and walked out. The cool night air hit my face the moment I stepped out. My heels clicked softly across the stone path as I walked toward the parking area. I wasn't thinking anymore. I just needed to leave. I made it halfway to the car when I heard my name. Mom, wait. I turned. Michael was running toward me, the bottom of his dress shoes slipping slightly on the gravel. His tie was undone, his face red. Please, can we talk? He said, stopping in front of me. I didn't say anything. I waited. I didn't know she was going to say that. He said quickly, the speech, the toast, any of it. I looked at him. You knew what kind of woman she was, Michael. He dropped his eyes. She's always been controlling. But this whole wedding got out of hand. I folded my arms. And the prenup? He nodded. She gave me an ultimatum a week ago. Said if I didn't sign it, she'd cut Tessa off. No wedding, no financial help, no nothing. And you agreed to that. I didn't want to lose Tessa, he said. And she didn't push back. She kept saying, let's just get through the day. I shook my head. Then you're not marrying Tessa. Michael, you're marrying her mother. That's when we both heard footsteps behind us. Tessa. She walked slowly, her hands clutching the sides of her dress to keep it from dragging on the pavement. Her makeup was smudged. She'd been crying. I heard you, she said softly. In the ballroom. Neither of us spoke. I didn't know how bad it got, she said, looking at me. I kept my head down because I've always been scared of her. Her voice cracked. She controls everything, even my thoughts sometimes. I didn't want it to be this way. Michael looked at her. Then why didn't you say something? Tessa wiped her face. Because I thought you'd stay anyway. I thought we'd be able to build a life after. Quietly. Away from her. Michael didn't respond. I watched the two of them, standing there like children who'd been pushed around by something too big to fight. Then he turned back to me. His voice was low. I don't know who I am around them anymore. That was the truest thing he'd said all weekend. I reached out and took his hand. Just held it. I'm not going to tell you what to do, I said. That's not my place. But you need to know what it feels like to stand on your own, without her voice in your head. He nodded slowly. I could see his shoulders drop like he was finally letting something go. Tessa looked at him. I don't want to be my mother, she whispered. But I'm not strong like you. Michael didn't answer her. Not yet. The three of us stood there, not knowing what came next. Then I let go of his hand. I'm going home, I said. You know where to find me. I walked to my car and opened the door. As I drove away, I saw them in the rearview mirror, still standing there. No photographers, no crowd, just two people who had no idea how to fix what they'd started. The road back to Spokane was long and quiet. The ferry ride felt colder than the first. I didn't sleep that night. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the next morning, the early light was just coming through the trees. I sat there for a few minutes, engine off, keys in hand. I kept seeing Michael's face. Tessa's too. That wedding may have happened. There were pictures, rings, toasts. But the truth, it didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a warning. I opened the door, stepped into my quiet house, and left my heels by the mat. And in my mind, I could still see the train of Tessa's dress trailing behind me in the gravel, like a thread that hadn't been tied off. 2 weeks went by. I settled back into my routine in Spokane. The grass had grown tall from all the spring rain. I trimmed the edges, cleaned out the bird bath, and pulled weeds from the front flower bed. I didn't talk much about the wedding. A few neighbors had seen the photos online. One of them said it looked elegant and asked how the food was. I just nodded and said it was a long day. At the library, I helped restock shelves in the large print section and chatted with Ruth, who always brought me a cup of instant coffee with 2 sugar packets. We didn't mention anything personal. That was fine by me. The only thing I couldn't shake was the silence. Michael hadn't called. Not once. Then one Thursday morning, I opened the front door to water the porch plants, and there he was, sitting on the top step, suitcase by his feet. "Hey, Mom," he said. I froze. "You hungry?" I asked. He smiled a little. "Yeah." I brought him inside, made scrambled eggs and toast. He didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. Just ate. Slowly. When he finally looked up, he said, "I left. I waited. I moved out. Backed out of everything. Told Tessa I couldn't do it. I never signed the prenup." He reached into his backpack and pulled out the unsigned document. Folded once, still crisp. I walked away from the whole thing. The apartment, the dinner with her parents, the photo shoots, everything. I didn't ask for details. I just said, "You're home." He nodded. "I wanted you to be proud of me again." I placed my hand on his. "I never stopped being proud of you. I was just waiting for you to be proud of yourself again." We sat in silence after that. Nothing felt forced. No need to explain every moment. That night, I opened the guest room. It still had the quilt my mother made years ago. I fluffed the pillows and put a small lamp by the bed. "You don't have to stay forever," I told him, "but as long as you need." "Thanks, Mom." The next morning, I placed a small plant on his windowsill. It was a pot hose, the kind you couldn't kill unless you really tried. "What's this?" he asked, rubbing the leaf between his fingers. "Something alive," I said, "for the both of us." He smiled. "I'll try not to kill it." The days moved slow after that. We had coffee on the porch, watched old crime shows at night. He helped me dig new holes for the tulips. He didn't talk about Tessa, and I didn't ask. Some nights he sat outside by himself, hoodie pulled tight around his face, staring up at the sky like he was sorting through all the noise that had followed him back. But little by little, the house felt lighter. He laughed again. Not big laughs, but the small, quiet kind you recognize when they come back after being gone too long. I watched him reach for the mail, fix the front steps, and talk with the neighbor's dog like he used to when he was a teenager. It didn't erase what had happened, but it softened it. That plant on the windowsill started to grow new leaves. And I realized sometimes you don't get the ending you pictured. Sometimes you lose a wedding and still save a son. A month after Michael moved back in, I started writing again. Nothing big, just small pieces. Things I needed to get off my chest. One night I sat at the kitchen table with my old laptop and typed out everything that had happened. I didn't use names or locations. I didn't post it to shame anyone. I wrote it because I needed to remember the truth, what I saw, what I felt, and how I walked out of that ballroom with more strength than I walked in. I titled it "The Wedding Where I Realized I Wasn't Small." I posted it anonymously on a blog where people share life experiences. I thought maybe a few strangers might read it. By the end of the week, it had over 12,000 views. And the comments. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. My daughter married into a family like that. I stayed silent. I regret it. Women, mostly mothers, mostly older, left story after story. Not angry, just honest. A local radio host even read a piece of it on air during her morning show. Said she got chills. A bride-focused podcast discussed it without naming names. They referred to it as the mother of the groom letter. Even in Seattle circles, someone told Michael there were quiet whispers about the Langfords. Not loud, just enough to leave a mark. But I didn't need that. That wasn't why I wrote it. I wrote it to remind myself I hadn't lost my voice. 3 seasons passed. The houseplant on Michael's windowsill was still growing. He got a job offer at a conservation nonprofit just outside Spokane. Nothing flashy, just steady, meaningful work. And then he met someone. Her name was Amina. She taught 5th grade at a local elementary school. She loved gardening, jazz music, and made the best sweet potato casserole I'd ever had. There was no rush, no pressure, just 2 people finding comfort in each other. They got engaged after a year and a half. When he told me, we were folding laundry in the living room. He said it like he was telling me the weather. Calm, peaceful. The wedding wasn't at a big estate. It wasn't on an island. It was in our backyard. We set up folding chairs under the maple tree. A friend played acoustic guitar. The food was potluck. My neighbor brought lemon bars. And before they said their vows, Michael stood and cleared his throat. I want to thank one person first, he said. The one who showed me what it means to stand tall when the world wants you to shrink. He looked at me. Mom, I hope you know, I finally understand. If you've ever waited years for someone to finally get it, hit subscribe. You deserve to hear more stories that see you, not skip you. I didn't cry then, not in front of everyone, but I cried later, not because I was sad, but because I knew that moment would live in me forever. After the cake was cut and the chairs were packed away, I sat on the back porch with a glass of water, listening to the laughter fade into the night. I remembered that day in Bainbridge, the dress, the speech, the look Bernice gave me, and I thought to myself, I was once called trash, but trash gets thrown away. I stayed. I stood. I spoke. So maybe I'm something stronger than they'll ever be. To anyone watching this, have you ever been made to feel invisible at your own child's moment? Would you have walked away or spoken up like I did? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever protected someone you love, share your story. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe if you'd like more stories like this. Sometimes the quietest voices leave the loudest mark.